You already know what time it is. It's R3's time, where we read. I'm Naila. I'm your CEO and your founder of R3. We're eyes, we're lives, we're lives, where we promote knowledge of self through education and activism. What better way to do that than to read, write, and comprehend for your own overstanding? So, of course, we're jumping right into it. We have wrapped up. Congratulations. Woo! We have finally wrapped up West Africa and Islam by Peter B. Clarke. So today we'll just kind of be reading the end of the book in conclusion, and we'll also go over some of the Arabic words that we have been talking about and discussing. That is at the back of the book as well. But we will go ahead and wrap it up. The last chapter that everyone should have actually left off on was chapter 8, the 1960 to 1980 Islam since independence. So I'll read briefly from there just to summarize some of that as well. And a lot of the West African countries during the 1960s started to get their independence. So we'll talk about that as well as going over briefly just how Islam spread so fast over those few years that we should say. So I'm going to pass it over to our host with the most. She's going to let us know a little bit more. And I'll be back. And we'll also introduce our next book at the end. Stay tuned.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Can y'all hear me out there? Because I said, can you hear me? All right, now I'm kind of silent. But anyway, I'm going to keep on going. It's the Real Life R3 Book Club. And we here represent today. We are concluding the book by Peter Clarke. And it is called History in Islam. Islam in West Africa. Hopefully you've been reading this book. If not, you can always catch up, because any book that we read is still on the shelf, and you can pick it up and read it for yourself. You can reach us at R3 Realize, and then we'll get you to Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, and the website where you can like, share, follow, all for free. We are very generous over here. We do that for free. Now, if you want to donate $1 to make us holla, we will take the dollars. Just go ahead and kick that donation button, and we will gladly accept it. We have campaigns like scholarship funds available and other things. So we're just going to conclude this book. It's not going to be very long. And then later when I jump back in, hopefully, we have a short summary of our next book. Back to you.
All right. Did you want to add anything? Oh, that's me. Your thoughts or your feelings of the book before we just go ahead, or at the end? It's up to you.
Oh, no, I like the book. I got to finish reading it so I can get the full meaning behind the book. But I like knowing the history and how the religion was spread a lot of times through fear, through war, and through just assimilation of different cultures crossing each other, and how in West Africa specifically, they integrated their own cultures. They never let their identity completely leave, just to assimilate to the religion. So I like that. Okay, perfect. So chapter 8 is, again, speaking about the 1960 to 1980. So it talks about Islam since independence. It was, and I'll kind of just read briefly there, and we'll jump around. But there was a statement on page 8 that I actually liked, so I highlighted it. It says, however, whatever problems West Africa taken as a whole has moved forward in many areas since independence, although there are those who believe that the process of full, real liberation, as understood by writers like Frantz Fanon, has hardly begun. I like that statement because a lot of times we think the sake of it's enough to say that we're a liberated country, a liberated people, simply because we're not in those certain conditions that we were in before. But it's important to understand what liberation is as a whole, and no one can take liberation, and no one can give us our freedom. We have to constantly fight for it. So I think that is important, and I like how they mentioned Frantz Fanon. We've read some of his works, and just speaking about the wretched of earth, black skin, white mask, those type of things that are constantly pushing us towards liberation in all circumstances, walk of life, socially, politically, and culturally. So we also see this religion liberation being entered in. So I like that they mentioned that in the beginning. They're referencing chapter 8, and I kind of just read for those who haven't been introduced. In that sentence, this paragraph says that, the first paragraph on page 235,
The growing strength of nationalist movements and the impacts of events such as World War II and the West Africans played an important part, brought about the sudden death, quote unquote, of the European rule in West Africa. Beginning with Ghana in 1957 and ending with Guinea-Bissau, successful armed struggle against Portugal in 1975, one West African country after another regained its independence. For many West African countries, the independence period to date has been one of rapid political, economic, and social change. The pace of this change, the colonial economic, political, and cultural legacy, the irrational behavior of the international economic order, internal strife, and natural disasters such as the Sahel drought of 1972 to 74 have made the independence period in many cases a problem-ridden era. However, the quote that I highlighted, whatever the problems, West Africa taken as a whole has moved forward in many areas since independence. Although there are those who believe that the process of full, real liberation as understood by writers like Frantz Fanon has hardly begun. It is against this background and with an eye of theoretical and concrete proposals advanced in the search for the ideal post-colonial society that I provide, the author speaking, this analysis of Islam's post-independence development in 3 West African states, Senegal, Upper Volta, and Nigeria. Although there is some discussion here of the actual expansion of Islam, I do not intend to leave matters at the level of a blow-by-blow account of the gains here and losses there. I want to also consider such related issues as the organizational development of Islam, the growth and impact of the pilgrimage, the relations between the Islam in West Africa and Muslims world as a whole, Islam's position vis-a-vis secularism and constitutional development, and Muslim-Christian relations in West Africa since independence. Okay? So you might lose me briefly. All of my phones are dying, of course. I'm going to plug this one in for Instagram, but we'll still be on the computer here. Yeah. Okay. So that is kind of the introduction to chapter 8. I also like how he did give us, we are people that are figurative. So can you see that? Seeing the pictures on this page to give in perspective on what countries in Africa gained their independence thus far. Mauritania in 1960, Mali 1960, Niger 1960, Nigeria 1960, Ghana 1957, Ivory Coast 1960, Guinea 1958, Senegal 1960, Benin 1960, Togo 1960, Liberia 1847, and Cameroon. So this is a map. And I like how he pointed that out as well. All right. So then I wanted to jump over to page 237. Last paragraph. It says here, the majority of Muslims in Senegal, including the leaders of the brotherhoods, do not appear to want any wholesale change in the constitution. Some, however, want certain laws, altered laws, which they believe are contrary to certain basic Islamic precepts. They are, for example, opposed to certain provisions of the Family Code of 1972. Among other things, this code permits 3 options with regard to rules governing marriage. One of these options, and one which Muslims criticize and would like to see changed, permits the husband to choose among 3 types of marriage. Polygamy, in which case the number of wives is limited to a maximum of 4. Limited polygamy, where the husband is permitted to have fewer than 4 wives. And simultaneously, monogamy. If the husband chooses monogamy, his choice is definitive. If he chooses limited polygamy, he can further limit, but he cannot increase his number of wives. Some Muslims see the provision as being contrary to the Islamic law relating to marriage, according to which a man can have up to 4 wives simultaneously if he so desires and have the necessary means. I just wanted to bring attention to that because we do see a lot of people in the public eye. I won't name one of the celebrities, but they believe that they can kind of do this interchanging of Islam and the beliefs. Especially as an African people, it's important that we know thyself, know the foundations. But you see a lot of people make plays like, I can have multiple wives. I'm Muslim. I practice Islam. But I like how it kind of mentioned there that in West Africa, you started to see these brotherhoods say that if you pick to have 1 wife, that's all you can have. You can't say 1 wife today, 4 years from now, you want 4 wives. Can't be that. If you're on limited polygamy where you have 2 or 3 wives, you have to stay with what you have. You can always lessen that approach, but you can't add to that. So I really wanted to bring that up just to bring it to light and attention. So then on page 2, I'm too far ahead. Wait a second. Okay, on page 244, I just wanted to highlight and note this as well. So the last paragraph, some Muslim leaders, however, both during the colonial era, as we have seen, and since independence, have advised and encouraged girls to pursue their education beyond the primary school level. In recent times, many of the emirs of northern Nigeria have been encouraging parents to send their daughters to school and to allow them to pursue their education beyond the primary school level. Whereas the tendency in the past was to encourage girls to limit their interest to domestic subjects, today they are being advised to broaden their horizons and qualify themselves for entry into the teaching and nursing professions in particular. It is often pointed out in support of this stand on the education of women that Usman Dan Fodio did not limit the education of women to domestic subjects, and that his daughter Khadija and Asma were highly educated women. So it's important to just reference there that education was also prioritized when we are speaking with Muslim leaders during the colonial era in Nigeria as well. Let's see. I also wanted to... My bookmark fell out, actually. Okay, we'll actually jump on over. Okay, so just adding some quotes from chapter 8. If you haven't read it, make sure you read the entire book. It's very important to get all of the information through. So we'll read just to wrap up the conclusion for the entire book, but we'll start with chapter 8 and just end there, since that was the last paragraph as well. I'm using one hand, guys. Bear with me. All right. So in conclusion for chapter 8, 1960 to 1980, on page 254, it says, we have seen in this chapter that while much of Islam's history in West Africa in recent years have been simply a continuation of its past, there have also been significant developments, some of which have been discussed above. To what extent the drive to unify and organize Islam, to oppose secularism, to give greater force and scope to the Sharia is part of what is widely referred to as a contemporary society as the resurgence of Islam. It is difficult to say. Certainly there is evidence that the Islamic Revolution in Iran under the leadership of Ayatollah Khomeini has influenced the attitudes and thinking of Muslims in West Africa. He was voted Man of the Year from 1979 in a poll held in one heavily Islamicized region of West Africa. But it was not clear whether his popularity was due to the fact that he opposed what was seen as United States interference and exploitation in Iran, or to the fact that he had brought about an Islamic revolution in the country. Some Muslims undoubtedly did support the Ayatollah's attempts to turn Iran into a genuine Islamic state, and while others saw it as an attack on neo-colonialism, there were those who regarded it as an unwitting invitation to outsiders to control and dominate a developing country. The resurgence of Islam is a complex phenomenon. It incorporates a reaffirmation of Islamic identity and may arise primarily from religious belief. It includes a demand for a return to pure orthodox form of Islam, the type of Islamic society which, for example, Usman Dan Fodio sought to establish. In some cases, it may be no more than an attachment to Islam as a cultural community. It could also be a part of a well-financed movement in the Islamic world which challenges the global concept of modernity, which is based on Western industrial Christian civilization. In West Africa, all these various aspects of Islamic resurgency have been manifest at one time or another. Islamic resurgency, however, should be seen in the perspective. In a sense, there is a little that is entirely new in the demands and perspectives of Muslims who, for instance, advocate that the Shahara would be allowed greater force and scope, and who demand a return to the golden age of Islamic orthodoxy. Muslims in West Africa today, although better organized, more self-confident, and more in touch with the rest of the Muslim world, do not form a community characterized by rigid uniformity. As in the past, so too in the contemporary situation, there are a variety of strands to Islam in the West African setting and a variety of responses to the wider world. The majority of Muslims would not wish to assert the all-embracing self-sufficiency of Islam and exclude any consideration of other values and ideas. In practice, there is considerable tolerance and even mixing. Generally speaking, then, the variety of perspective and responses to the wider society apart, what does seem clear is that the contemporary situation in West Africa, many Muslims, whether one labels themselves conservative, modernist, fundamentalist, or whatever, while not necessarily wanting to see an Islamic state established, are convinced now as ever they were of the relevance of certain Islamic ideas and principles to the social, intellectual, and cultural well-being of West Africa. There is no doubt poses a problem for those secularization theorists who tend to link a decline in the commitment to religious values and practices to industrialization, modernization. There is little evidence of such a decline so far as Islam in West Africa is concerned. Okay. Okay. And so it concludes chapter 8 that we have just read as well. Oh, hello, Melody. That concludes chapter 8 that we had just read. So now we're just going to wrap up with the conclusion of this entire book. And of course, it just talks about African conversion to Islam and just some general comments that we get from the author, which I actually found it very interesting. And again, he's just going to kind of speak on that tradition and the mass increase of conversions that was happening in West Africa and why so fit. So it also has to do with the environment, the time, but it really speaks about how a lot of these things that people converting over was due to like manifestations or dreams. And sometimes he's going to quote one person who said he found Islam is because he literally was praying or thinking about something and said, he has to find himself on the right path. We're going to read it. And as soon as he said he has to find himself on the right path, he found the book, the Quran, and then opened it up, and it was speaking about if you find yourself on the right path. So it kind of aligned. And African people, African diaspora, we are very figurative people. So we see things in different ways. We see things with pictures. We believe in forecasting, manifesting, predictions, right? Telepathic. We have these spiritual connections that always relate back to us. So having Islam in West Africa, it's just the obvious. Again, I always quote Desmond Tutu, when the white man came, we had the land, they had the Bible. When the white man left, we had the Bible and they had the land. Same goes with the Quran. African people have always had a spiritual connection to the world order, to the creator, the supreme being, whatever so you call it, to the ancestors. But it also took a form when religious entered in, which also we talked about how religion was used to control. Religion started being popularized by the elites, even though the indigenous people were already practicing certain things, right? And so the elites started to take control over this, to have more control over the people. So this is where I see it as that religion was more of a base and a foundation to control, rather than to necessarily just wholeheartedly uplift people. And just be there as a guide. Although we see a lot of different reasons like the brotherhood. And yeah, we'll kind of discuss that. But in conclusion for this book, and we are reading West Africa and Islam by Peter B. Clarke. In conclusion, it's about a page and a half, so hold tight. Let's do it. In the late 19th century and early years of the 20th century, when Islam was rapidly gaining ground in West Africa, many observers of the situation looked upon this advance as if it were inevitable. I already quoted that the French scholar Quillian, who wrote in 1910 that the progressive continuous expansion of Islam in West Africa is a fact that no one knows anything about the subject will deny. Alongside Islam, Quillian continued, Christianity was remarkable for its almost total failure in some areas. I also wanted to bring note here, he is going to also mention the differences between Christianity and Islam, and what he noticed and what I also noticed is that, you know how with Christianity, they tell you to pray and worship in a church, right? You usually do it in a more private setting, gatherers, you know, people of the church. In Islam, you see people pray everywhere. You always see them. You'll see Uber drivers pull over and pray when it's Ramadan time. And they have these prayers that are more open. So a lot of people kind of grasp towards that as well. We'll read about that briefly. But it says, alongside Islam, Quillian continued, Christianity was remarkable for its almost total failure in same areas. To the historian and social scientist, however, events and developments are simply possibilities before they happen and only certainties afterwards. What then lies behind Islam's success in West Africa? That's a question. What then lies behind Islam's success in West Africa? Why did so many West Africans convert to Islam over the period of 1,200 years covered in this book? There are not easy questions to answer. Moreover, the historian and social scientist is at best capable of providing only a partial explanation. For many people, conversions is a religious, spiritual experience which the historian and social scientists have neither the method or techniques for analyzing or comprehending. Granted this fact, it is nonetheless the case that conversion does not take place in a social vacuum, so to speak. If one allows for its ultimately spiritual nature, it is nevertheless the case that the process of conversion can and often is triggered off or facilitated by ordinary concrete human events, and in turn affect the ordinary everyday world. We have seen that from all right, it dropped this out. We have seen, give me 1 second. All right, guys. So it looks like the meeting failed and crashed. So we're trying to get our hostess with the Moses back in, but we'll go ahead and still wrap up. So it says on page 259, we have seen that from the 8th century, North African Muslims, traders accompanied by Muslim missionaries, were attracted to the commercial centers of the Sahara and Sudan by the prospects of obtaining plentiful supplies of gold and slaves, and among other things. They came into contact with the Sahaja and the Tuareg, who acted as their protectors and guides along the trade routes, and also mixed with and eventually settled and established Muslim quarters in the capital cities of West African states, such as Kuambi, Saleh, and ancient Ghana. This was the beginning of Islam in West Africa, and throughout the period of 1,200 years covered in this book, trade has been important in terms of introducing and even attracting. Okay. Sorry, guys. So this was the beginning of Islam in West Africa, and throughout the period of 1,200 years covered in this book, as important in terms of introducing and even attracting many people to Islam. Not all the conversions, of course, which began in this way were lasting and permanent. Samari's ancestors, for example, once Muslim traders, returned to their traditional religion. However, to regard the whole expansion and development of Islam in West Africa as simply a byproduct of trade and commerce would, it seems to me, be a gross simplification and distortion of what in fact actually seems to have happened. While it is the case that it was in pursuit of trading interests that Islam was first established in certain areas of West Africa, and the same is true of Christianity, it is also the case that many West Africans became Muslims, not as a result of encountering Muslim traders and out of the desire to participate in the Muslim trading network, but for a variety of other reasons as well. In the local account of early conversions to Islam, for example, in parts of what is today the West African Republic of Ghana, there is very little reference to the role of Muslim traders as carriers or vehicles to Islam to those regions. Islam, for some of those who embraced it, was seen as highly prestigious religion Muslims were literate. They had wide-ranging diplomatic contacts, a formal system of education, and a simple but effective legal system. They were modernizing force with the skills essential for efficient administration of expanding, developing states or empires. The fact that Islam offers something new in terms of its vision of life, of the world, of man, and of his destiny, and skills and techniques they were considered to be essential for progress and development undoubtedly contributed to its growth in West Africa. It is also possible that the conversion of Islam was facilitated by the fact that in many instances there was a close affinity or significant equivalence between Islamic and African ideas on the certain issues of importance concerning the world, society, ethical and moral questions, and scientific approaches to explaining and interpreting natural and supernatural events. In some respects, the Islamic and African views of the orientation on certain issues were sufficiently similar as to make possible a correlation between them. The notion of a supreme being, for instance, was widespread in African religions, although the emphasis on the worship of the supreme being alone, without having recourse to intermediaries, was not apparently very widespread. Again, Fisher has shown that in the interpretation of dreams and visions, there was a possible point of contact between Islam and African traditional religion. Fisher states that, in quote, the very dream may be an avenue for the acceptance of new ideas or objects, or even of his religious beliefs, being thus in itself a channel of conversion. To cite but one example of dreams as a channel of conversion, a recent convert explained that he was in search for the right path, quote unquote, when he came across a Muslim book, quote unquote, which said that if to find in a prayer, you may be lucky. It says that in which it said that if you want to find something, you wake up at night and put it in a prayer, you may be lucky. And after once, twice, or thrice, you will dream about the thing you want to do. So I did this and was getting convinced that I should go to Islam. So he dreamed about this once, twice, or thrice, and then figured that this must be real. So it was a dream. Then he kept dreaming about it. It must be something he needs to guide to. So it also talks about not only the metaphysical formation, but it talks about the consciousness formation of Islam and religion overall, because we are figurative people. We do see things. We, like I just went over, we see things. We're telepathic, see things in our dreams, signs, synchronicities, numbers, and so once you start seeing this 1, 2, 3, it also is referenced, if you're a religious person anyway, 3 is the number of creation, R3, which is, we won't get into deep, but seeing things one time, okay, it might be something cool. Seeing it twice, okay, a coinkydink, right? Seeing it 3 times, it must be for sure. So I can completely relate it to that. While there are no doubt certain affinities between Islamic and African worldviews and the orientations to life which make possible correlations between them and facilitate conversions to Islam, I feel that there has been a tendency to overemphasize the similarities. Richard Burton and Mary Kingsley, among others, refer to the Africanness of Islam when compared to Christianity. But Mahola Agbegbe, the Nigerian Christian pastor, was probably reflecting the situation more accurately when he suggested that Islam, though not necessarily more African in essence than Christianity, adapted itself better than some Christian dominations to the African condition. The Islamic vision of man, of God, and of the world claims to be, and has been shown to be, unique and original in certain respects. Moreover, it is not embraced by West Africans simply because it has a soft opinion. It has a soft option. It can be a very demanding religion ethically, morally, intellectually, and in other ways. In addition to trade, dreams, and visions, literacy, value for its utilitarian, as well as supposedly religious qualities and the modernizing aspects of Islam which facilitated conversions, Islam also had an international dimension and an integrative qualities which made it attractive to rulers governing large empires where there was a considerable cultural and political pluralism and diversity, which I talked about how the elite started to popularize this in order to gain more mass control of the indigenous people or the rural people who are already practicing this, so quote on speak, right, with their traditional religions as well, traditional spiritualities and ancestral beliefs, I should call it. It says that on page 261, to wrap up, the jihad of the sword, as we have seen, was also an instrument in bringing parts of West Africa within Dar es-Salaam, the land of Islam. But even more important, the jihad of the sword was the work of the Sufi Brotherhood and the unmatched wandering Malams, about whom so much had been said in this book and elsewhere. They were there Then they were and are today the charismatic individuals from Abdullah B. Hassan to Ibrahim Niasse, who broke through barriers geographically and culturally, and whose claims met with a positive response from a wide range of people. Moreover, the ease with which Muslims relying on the local material available can set up a school or a mosque or a praying ground facilitates the expansion of Islam. Furthermore, and related to the points just made, the educative effects upon individuals and whole communities of Islamic ritual have been important in the spread of Islam. Remember, we're R3, the Real Book Club, where we promote knowledge of self. So knowledge makes man unfit to be a slave. And so, again, the education aspect of Islam was spreading wide and rapidly, which also was bringing converts, is what they're talking about. So it's important that we know as many things as possible and be a student of history, student of education, student of religion, student of science, students of everything, so we make our own choices a lot of times too. But I like that aspect, that it was the information they were giving. Page 261, this was something the great Muslim philosopher and theologian Al-Ghazali of 1058 to 1111 AD appreciated. Muslims are often identifiable by their dress, by what they eat or do not eat. Moreover, they pray anywhere and in the open, and thus make Islam a highly visible public religion. Islamic ritual have been termed the genius of Islam and has counted for a great deal in the diffusion of Islam in West Africa. As we have seen, the Christian missionary Hindera, working in Ibadan in the 19th century, realized this, and so too did one contemporary Nigerian pastor who explained recently that the Christian concentration on building stone edifices and the tendency to confine prayer and worship to church premises may well be a mistake. History is made in the present and understood by looking backwards, and it is clear that many different, sometimes interrelated factors have over the centuries from 750 AD onwards assisted the development of Islam in the West African setting. That is the end, and I like that statement, which is why I said it with a little bit of gumption. History is made in the present and understood by looking backwards. So it's just important that we understand what that even means. And we're R3, the Real Book Club, where we promote knowledge of self through education and activism. And an African term, since we're always talking about the African diaspora, is Sankofa. Go back and take it. Go back and see. Go back and get the knowledge. It's important that we go back in order to move forward a little bit farther. So we're going to wrap up, see if our hostess with the mostest can interject and let you know a little bit more and close us out. She'll tell you our new book. If not, I will. But some names related to Islam that you should know. Uh-oh, my phone is dying again. Tap in when you're ready.
Okay, hello?
Yes, you're there.
Okay, now, but you guys, this is going to be a little dry because I've already done this. Because our hostess...
we didn't hear you at all. Just go ahead.
But, yes, I did. Anyway, it is... this is R3 Realized Book Club. We promote knowledge itself. And this is all about the book for next week. We're going to be going into The Water Dancer by Ta-Nehisi Coates. A lot of you guys might know him. He is very famous journalist and activist and writer. And we're going into his debut novel. And it's a powerful blend of historical fiction, magical realism, and deep emotional truth. Most of us know Coates from his brilliant nonfiction work, especially Between the World and Me, but he turns in fiction to explore the haunting legacy of slavery through the story of Hiram Walker. Is a young man born into bondage in Virginia who discovers he possesses a mysterious power tied to memory and water. And I do believe that our memory is sometimes imprinted on our DNA, and the stories of our ancestors can be told through our dance, through our knowledge, through our history, through our voice, right? The book doesn't just tell a story, it invites and reimagines the underground resistance, reframe the meaning of freedom, and recognizing how memory, both personal and the collective, can be a source of strength, trauma, and transcendence. He weaves historical detail with elements of fantasy to ask big questions. What is freedom, really? And what are we willing to remember? And what have we been forced to forget? As we read, let us think about how this book challenges the traditional narratives of slavery and resistance and how it connects to our present struggles with identity, justice, and liberation. Let's reflect on Hiram's journey, not just a physical escape from bondage, but as a spiritual and emotional reclamation of self and family. And again, we'll be starting that book next week. It is The Water Dancer by Ta-Nehisi Coates. And pick it up and let's get started reading. is at R3 Realize, where you can get us at Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, as well as our website, where you can like, share, and follow on all those mediums for free. You can also donate. Click the donation button, and we will take all donations. We are set up, and we have different programs, drive-by, unhoused campaigns for clothing and food. We also have a scholarship right now. We have several students that are in the running. We are analyzing the scholarships now, but we are $500 short to give 3 kids $1,000, and we really want to help 3 kids. So if you can do that at R3 Real Lives, look us up, sign up for the on the website so you can keep abreast of different events and what books we're reading. And I'll see you next Tuesday. Back to you, kid.
All right. Well, perfect. Thank you for taking the time to wrap up again. Yeah, we are R3 Real Book Club. We just finished wrapping up West Africa and Islam by Peter B. Clarke. And the reason we read this book is because it's very important that you get an understanding of the development of Islam and West Africa, religion overall in West Africa. And we talk a lot about Christianity as well, but just the development of it and the history of it, and go back and take your knowledge back and the information back. So this has been a really, really good book, a rigorous book to study. But go ahead, check this book out. It's very interesting. There are some terms on the back as well as some discussion questions if you ever want to go over them again. And so I'll give you a few terms because I said I would, and we'll end with that. Allah is the name used by Muslims for God or the supreme creator, supreme being, their one God. Amir is one who commands in battle, especially in a jihad, or the governor of a Muslim-ruled territory. Baraka is a spiritual blessing. Made me think of Barack Obama. Baraka, a spiritual blessing. Dar as-Salam is ruled by the Muslims, the land of Islam. And let's see, the hadith, the authentic sayings of the Prophet Muhammad. Our hostess with the Moses says she went over this too. Our Haji, which is the pilgrimage to Mecca. The Hijara, which is the immigration for doctrinal reasons. We have Jama, a Muslim community under a religious leader. Kufr, the unbelief. Mahdi, the God-guided one, whom some Muslims believe will, at the end of the world, ensure the final triumph of Islam. The Mujaddid is a restorer, the renewer of Islam. The Qadi, the Muslim judge or the arbitrator. Ramadan, which we just got done celebrating. Ramadan, which is the annual Muslim fast of 1 lunar month. Out in there, Ramadan Mubarak, Ramadan Kareem. We started this book because it was important that we read it, especially as we practice Ramadan. I open and invite you guys to try next year with us. Me and the hostess with the Moses and R3. We do participate in Ramadan. No, we are not religious, but we are African. We are from the African diaspora, meaning we are all things, and all things are us. So don't be afraid, and also it helps boost your digestive system, amongst other things, and practice discipline within yourself. But we just finished reading West Africa and Islam by Peter B. Clarke. We will see you guys next week for the next book read, The Water Dancer by Ta-Nehisi Coates, and I will be posting it later. Peace, or we say 3. Let's see if we can get her to mute herself, or turn your video on. 3. Yes. Oh, wait. Let me turn it around and get your 3. Say something.
Something good. 3.
They can see you.
I know.
All right. See you guys. Oh, there it goes. Do it again. Say something. There you are. 3. All right. We will see you guys next week. 3's. Peace. Remember, when you see things in 3, it must be 3.